Labdien, Gamarjova. Hi everyone, this is Polina Gardo, and I'm excited to be part of Humans of Telecom.
Hey everyone, a very warm welcome to Humans of Telecom, the Unplugged podcast. This is your host Anurag Aggarwal. As you all know, this is a platform where we celebrate the people who keep our industry alive and kicking. Those who don't only bring experience but perspective as well. People who ask not just how things work, but why they matter. And today's guest is the perfect example of that. She only entered the telecom world in 2023, but don't let that fool you. Her roots are in something far deeper: analytical philosophy, logic, and game theory. Before roaming agreements and routing strategies, she was focused on understanding long term risks to humanity. Think AI, pandemics, even nuclear conflict. That mindset hasn't disappeared. It's simply found a new home. Whether she's leading international roaming at a new role or building courses for telco professionals, she brings a rare ability to zoom out and ask the bigger questions. Her life, much like her work, has spanned borders, living in several countries over the past decade, absorbing cultures, philosophies, and ways of thinking that continue to shape her unique lens on telecom. So, today we explore a truly different journey, one where logic meets latency and humanity meets roaming. And I personally meet this lovely lady with a fascinating yellow umbrella, which I've always associated with her, and an absolutely soothing and calming voice, which you'll get to encounter now. So, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Polina Gardo, roaming wholesale team leader at Rakuten Mobile. Polina, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for agreeing to be a part of this journey. We'd love to hear more about you. Which part of the world do you belong to? And from where are you joining this podcast today?
Hello, Anurag. It's a great pleasure to be here with you today. And first of all, thank you so much for your inspirational work. I've been listening to your podcast from day one of my telecom journey. In fact, I actually think I checked your first episode was uploaded on Spotify just a week after I joined my first telecom job. And your podcast has been inspirational and motivational for me, just knowing that there's this human side of telecom with its unique characters and quirky individuals and very unusual journeys made me think I want to stick around and meet more of them. So thank you so much for your work and thank you for inviting me today. I'm joining from Georgia, the country where I've been based for the past 2 years. But originally I'm from Latvia. I moved away on my own at the age of 16. I went to UK where I was first based in a tiny, very conservative village, which was more like Virginia Woolf book scene. And then I moved to Manchester for my bachelor's. But halfway through, I honestly realized I would rather be anywhere else in the world, but surrounded with football fans. So I opted in for remote study while traveling and working part time. And this sort of kicked off my gypsy journey. I moved to Vienna for a couple of years, and then I was based out of Cape Town. And somehow I ended up living in Venice during COVID, which was magical experience. And finally ended up in Georgia. So as you can guess, I will be probably on the move very soon again. But for now, Georgia.
Amazing, Polina. So, firstly, once again, welcome to the show. It always feels nice to have a loyal listener actually become a part of the guest list. And I must say, I think it's more than a coincidence that when you started your journey in telecom is around the same time when Humans of Telecom started its own journey. And what a fantastic journey it has been for you, all the countries you mentioned and so many fascinating parts of the world. So, how has the experience been in telecom? How did you happen to get into the telecom space and how has the journey been so far?
Well, if it wasn't a romantic story of falling in love with telco or roaming or ATP or whatever it might be, I just needed money back in the day. So I'm a philosopher. I majored in analytical philosophy and logic, and then I went on to work for a research organization based in Oxford, and I was focusing on long-term existential risks associated with artificial intelligence, pandemic, nuclear wars, essentially trying to figure out what to do when we have this very small probability risks with possibly very devastating outcomes, or when we at all don't know what the long-term effects of our actions will be. And, for those who think that philosophy is just rumbling about the meaning of life, actually, we use a lot of mathematical tools, game theory, probability theories, and sort of try to add moral calculus to it or moral values on top to evaluate what should be done. I actually think philosophy is an amazing thing that all of us should be exposed to at some point in their lives because it helps with critical thinking and it gives you this sort of 360 ability to evaluate any situation. But it's not a very well paid domain, mostly because nobody really wants to know what the long term effects of their actions will be. And when I realized that, I started looking for a more financially feasible option. And I was really lucky back in the day that I had family friends who suggested applying for a job in telecom. Honestly, I felt like I was selling my soul to the devil, but at least I sold it to a nice industry, and it's been an amazing journey ever since. And I met so many amazing people on the way and learned so much that I'm really grateful that somehow I ended up in telecom.
Well, Paulina, I must say that many of us in telecom think that we are living in hell. So when you say that you sold your soul to the devil, it might just actually be true in some ways, but we are hoping that you're actually enjoying your journey and both ways. Telecom is learning a lot from the fascinating background of Paulina. And so is Paulina finding telecom as a new home, which is very warm and welcoming.
It is very warm and welcoming, maybe a straight hello from the hell.
Awesome. And within this journey of yours, Paulina, is there some one particular memorable or impactful moment that you'd like to share with our listeners today?
Well, I think one of the most memorable moments was actually my first day of the first ever telecom event I attended. I walked in wearing shoes that were way too ambitious for the venue and way too ambitious for telecom world. I was just a newbie. I joined 2 months back, and I was supposed to travel with a senior colleague from my company who was supposed to sort of introduce me to the industry. I do the small talk and he does the business while I learn about the company. But the day before departure, he told me that he won't be able to make it. And the only advice he gave was like, be honest. If you don't know, you don't know, and that's fine. And so I'm making my way to my first ever meeting, and it was with a gentleman I absolutely admire in this industry. I pitched whatever I pitched, and then he asked me so many questions. And honestly, at that point, it felt like he threw at me every telecom abbreviation that exists in the world. I sat there with huge eyes and I said, I'm so sorry, I'll check internally and get back to you with those questions. But I made a point for myself that day to get more flat shoes for the events and really, dig deeper into more technical details of whatever I'm doing, because at the end of the day, they're really a game changer. So this was my first sort of crash course of learning in telecom. And it's more a funny story, but if I could share something more impactful and more powerful, it was probably when I hit burnout. And I know it's not a cool thing to talk about, but I have experienced it once, and it's a really powerful thing that sort of it's world bending, it's bending your mental part, and it makes you reconsider how you show up for yourself, for your family, friends, and colleagues. And for me, in a way, it was a blessing because I had an amazing team with me who actually gave me the space to take a break and, first of all, to step over my ego and, get back on track, feel like a superwoman again, and just keep doing what I do best. So, between the sore feet and soul searching, I would say the telecom has taught me already a lot. And it's a very beginning of my journey.
Awesome. And some of those thoughts actually resonate with me also. I remember as an amateur when I attended my first conference over 11 years ago. I still remember that I was also sent in by my then company, Tata Communications, as the sole member representing my company. And I can totally empathize with how you must have been feeling. As far as footwear goes, yes, I also remember having gone through the journey of wearing leather shoes and eventually learning my way through that one can actually be a lot more comfortable, and it just makes business sense to wear more comfortable shoes, especially if an event like MWC is what you're talking about. Which was your first event? I'm sure the listeners would love to know. Which was this event that you attended?
It was actually GCCM London, so it wasn't a huge event, but it was still, I knew I was a newbie. Now looking back, I can imagine the picture of me walking into the room and I would straight away say, those shoes, they don't fit in. But yeah, but it was amazing experience. I just at that event I realized during the networking events how friendly and welcoming the people are, and that they're not as boring as I expected. Not really engineering nerds or obsessive about switching equipment. It was really a great way to meet a lot of people back then in London.
Absolutely. And I feel a lot of the bonding actually happens post event at the parties and the karaoke nights and whatnot that we all have amongst ourselves. So I'm sure that some of it you must have already experienced. And I wish you all the best for the future such events as well.
Thank you.
All right. And on that note, let's move to the human side. So let's talk a lot more about Paulina as the human being. So, Paulina, while I think, anyways, not many of us know you very well, but when somebody comes up at a conference after hearing this podcast, if there is one shocking or unknown thing about Paulina that you can share with us, what would that one thing be?
I don't think it will be a very shocking one because I gave out a little bit of it at the beginning in my rumble about philosophy, but I'm a big logic nerd. So I absolutely love solving logical puzzles like real symbolic logic with its quantifiers and inference rules. And I would gladly stay in on a Friday night or over the weekend just by myself and solve those puzzles at home instead of going out. And this sort of translates into the little superpower I realized I have. If you put me in any unknown city, a country, venue, whatever it might be, I almost instinctively know where to go. I think it's a sort of same logic, but in real world, where you notice all the little clues and you kind of derive one thing from another, almost instantly knowing where to go. So a lot of my friends really love traveling with me for that reason, but I quite often bail on them for going out.
Awesome. I think that's a very interesting facet about you, a logic nerd, as you put yourself. But it is very interesting because, a lot of people always associate philosophy as something which is, you can't always treat that as equivalent to something like math or logic. One always treats them as two absolute opposite ends of the spectrum. But I think you rightly have said that this is as much a science as any other, and there is a lot more that goes behind it than what meets the eye. So absolutely get it. Yeah.
Yeah, I had that revelation my first year of university when I realized I'm not going to read the works of Searching for Meaning of Life. I'm actually going to solve this weird mathematical equations for the next 4 years. And it's been a very useful tool ever since.
Awesome. And Paulina, beyond solving these mathematical puzzles and all, what else do you do to recharge yourself? What are your other passions and interests like?
Other charging is a tough part, different levels of being tired call for different measures, right? But my top three are dancing, being in the nature, and running. So the nature is sort of linked to my childhood because I grew up in the countryside and I was always hiking or playing outside, picking flowers, being somewhere by the river. And I still try to incorporate that in my daily routine, even though I don't live in the most green city in the world, but I try to go for hikes regularly or at least go for a walk every day. And it's something that helps me to recharge after a day of working. And those who know me would expect me to mention that because I'm obsessed with Argentine tango. I dance it socially and it's absolutely addictive thing. I started dancing probably 3 years ago. I still take lessons and I dance socially almost every weekend. And you would be amazed how big is the Argentine tango global community. Anywhere else you go in the world, you'll find people that go out on almost every night of the week to dance with strangers. And some would say that Argentine tango is basically just walking in a loving embrace. And it's a very difficult skill to learn because you feel extremely vulnerable when you're in a close embrace with someone. And in tango, you also have to kind of lead without giving mixed signals and follow without disappearing. And that opens so many vulnerabilities and so many hurdles when you're trying to learn something that is really amazing hobby. I really enjoy it. And I think there are a couple of people in the industry who also picked up Argentine tango after we had that conversation. And I know there are some people who've been dancing for a long time in the industry. So it's always amazing to see how big the Argentine tango world is. But beyond dancing, which is my social escape, I also run, and I don't really care about pace or distance so much. I do it as a form of meditation. I keep track of my heart rate, I focus on the stride of the feet, and I just run wherever my feet takes me, right? So with all of that, my favorite distance is still 9K. It's kind of not offensive to 10 or 5.
Awesome. So that's a lot of interesting things about you. And Argentine tango, I've
Mm.
actually heard the term for the first time. Maybe I have witnessed this, but never known exactly what is it that the dancers are performing. But I guess the next time that you are at a conference, and especially these wonderful parties I've been talking about, let's hope one gets a chance to actually witness Polina live in her Argentine tango mode.
Let me promise you that I'll take you to actually a proper Argentine tango evening. Somewhere in the world we meet, I'll show you the proper Argentine party with its music and culture and dancers. You will love it.
Perfect. I'll take you on for that. And definitely, I look forward to that experience. And now we have another very interesting question. So, two truths and a lie. So, Paulina, you have to share three statements with us today. Two of them have to be truths, one of them has to be a lie, and I'll try my best to guess which one of them is a lie. So, do you have three such statements for us today?
I do. So, number one, I was trained as a professional piano player and performed solo in front of a big audience. Number two, I dived with blue sharks in Cape Town. And number three, I was a professional athlete on the Latvian national sports team.
All right. I think all three seem quite possible in your case, Paulina. So, I'm very tempted to say that they are all true. Knowing your multifaceted personality, being a professional pianist, I think that's something quite possible. Having gone to Cape Town and got a chance to dive in with the Blue Sharks, okay, that's equally interesting. I'm going to take that also as a possible truth. And being a professional athlete in Latvia. Okay, just for the sake of the question, I'm going to presume, though you have mentioned you are fond of running. But just for the sake of this question, I'm going to presume that the third one is a lie and the first two are truths. And we'd love to hear more about all of them. So, am I right out here?
And you're wrong.
Okay. So, let's see which one is which.
So, I was indeed a professional athlete on the Latvian national sports team. I was doing wakeboarding, and that's sort of snowboarding behind the boat. I was competing on a national and international levels with my amazing team in Latvia. My career was not so long because one of the events, I think I was super nervous, so I face planted on the water at very high speed and had a big injury. After which, I only do it as a vacational hobby. And I did dive with blue sharks in Cape Town. It was a very nice experience because you dive without any protection. So it's not like a cage dive, which you would do with white sharks, right? But with blue sharks, you just dive with them and they're like little puppies floating around you. They're super playful. But the only thing to keep in mind is that if the sun reflects on your hands, they can confuse them with little sardines and they come to bite it off. That's one thing to pay attention to, is not to show your hands when you're diving with them. And about the piano, it was honestly a tricky put question because I indeed do have professional music education, which was my first kind of degree that I got. I finished musical school in Latvia, and then I finished the professional piano performance degree in UK. But I mentioned that I performed solo in front of a big audience. Unfortunately, I could never do that because I was always very nervous being on stage alone. And even though I play at home and I'm out of practice, I still have the 10 working fingers and I open the sheet music sometimes, but I never play for other people.
Interesting. But as I said, all three aspects seemed fairly possible for Paulina. So, I wasn't very wrong in that. So, you caught me on a technicality, but
Of
yes,
course.
it is amazing too.
Yeah. That was your wish to make it as hard as possible, and so I obeyed.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you did a wonderful job at that, Polina. And it's interesting to know. So, you have been a professional athlete as well, and also a trained pianist. And of course, you've had your fun with the Sharks. So, interesting. Well played. And, Polina, the last question of this section, if there's one thing you could possibly change about your life, what would that one thing be?
This question got me thinking because, I changed so many places where I lived. And honestly, whenever I feel something needs change, I act on it immediately. But I think there is one thing that if I could, I would change in my life. But maybe it comes from my young age. But I feel like there is this feeling of purpose that shapes and shifts with time. And it's something where I noticed a gap lately. I do want to create something that has a real positive social impact, or at least positive impact on individual human lives. Just to put it in a perspective, I've started to realize just how much I like being part of a strong, uplifting communities. I used to have that being part of the female leaders communities, and I had that in sports, especially in wakeboarding. You have like 10 people cheering you up so you don't face plant at the 40 kilometers per hour speed. And I think there is real magic in celebrating others, in growing together, in feeling proud for others, and also using that to learn how to celebrate your own wins. As I said, it's kind of a vague answer for me because I'm at very early days in figuring out on how I want to channel that back into my life. I'm thinking about what is the best way to do good, or at least how to do good better with what I already have. So once I figure it out, it will be absolutely something that I can change about my life. But as of now, it's something that if I could, I would change.
Amazing. That's a wonderful thought, Polina. And with that, we come to our last question, our signature question. What does being human mean to you? What sort of a human being would you want the world to remember you as?
So, what does being human mean to me? I tried to answer so many philosophical questions for many years, and this is a very tough one. I honestly think it's my favorite part of this podcast as well. I always listen very carefully to what other participants have to say. And there is some similarity between the answers is that most would say that empathy, however it's phrased, but empathy is usually one of the most important qualities that people define. And for me, there are other two definitions of being human that are also very important. So one of them is resilience. As humans, I believe we have this innate ability to make mistakes or make the same mistakes 10 times in a row and still try again. Don't give up and keep trying. And that's a little superpower that we as humans have. So resilience is number one for me of being human. And then number two is creativity. And I don't mean creativity which is expressed in some sort of arts like painting or music or singing. I mean just creativity of how you perceive this world, how you appear in this world, because we all have different perception. We all have different experiences, and how we channel that back into our lives is very creative. And creativity comes in how you choose your life path and who you want to be when you grow up, or what sort of hairstyle you prefer, right? So we have so many different ways of being creative. And for me, this is also one of the biggest identifications of being human. What sort of human being would I be want to remembered as? Honestly, looking at the history books, I would not want to be mentioned there because it's reserved for bad guys. But if I look at my family and friends, I would love to be remembered as someone who has a lot of energy, who could tell one or two good stories at the dinner, who hosted those nice dinners and was warm and welcoming. And as Jason Bryan mentioned on one of the earlier podcasts, get your hands dirty, try things out, try as many things as possible, and enjoy this life and this world to the fullest. So, as for myself, I don't think I'm 100% there yet, but this is a promise to myself that I will try. So, yeah, thank you so much for this question. It's really got me thinking.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Polina. I think all the attributes you mentioned about what being a human means for you, creativity, resilience, and empathy, and all that you've mentioned that you'd want the world to remember you for, I think you're already working really well in that direction. And I think a lot of listeners who get a chance to meet Polina at some point as well would actually resonate with all that you said and would agree that you're quite on the right path of the legend that you want to leave behind about Polina.
Thank you so much, Anurag.
Amazing. And on that note, Polina, thank you so much for being a part of this journey. And to all our wonderful listeners here, thanks a lot for tuning into the show. We hope this episode gave you a good glimpse of the human side of Polina Gardo, a self-proclaimed logic nerd whose life journey is best described as a gypsy journey. A truly multifaceted personality, a philosopher by education and a telecom leader by profession. A nature lover, a seasoned runner, a former professional athlete, and even an Argentine tango enthusiast. Someone who dove headfirst into the telecom world during a very first industry conference and never looked back. And finally, someone who's fearlessly honest, opens up about her personal experiences, including navigating burnout and showcasing her wonderful attributes of empathy, resilience, and creativity. That for us is Polina Gardo. So, if you enjoyed today's episode, do stay tuned in because we shall soon be releasing yet another episode and another compelling story from the telecom space. And do follow the podcast on a preferred streaming channel. On behalf of Humans of Telecom, this is your host Anurag Aggarwal signing off for now. Take care.